Franklin the Turtle was always one of those shows that I loved deeply as a kid. Actually, I was a little bit more than obsessed with the series itself when my mother first read me my first Franklin book. Listening for the first times, the stories of the titular Franklin and the various friends that he had, almost all of them named after the species that they were named, minus Franklin, going on adventures and tackling real-life issues for children was something that stuck with me throughout the years. My love for Franklin only continued to grow when the official TV show of the same name, Franklin, came out on Noggin, before it was entitled Nick Jr. in 1997. Honestly, I can say that the show was about as amazing as the books were, and if anything, a lot more palatable and realistic. Like with the Backyardigans, Arthur, and the like, Little Bear actually provided something more to kids than just the average teaching a lesson or average language than most shows were portraying at the time. Little Bear actually managed to provide great character development, realistic reactions to various situations, and some honest lessons that to this very day stuck with me. I continued to watch the show for some time, up until the point where I was hand drawing up until the point where the hand-drawn animation was replaced with CGI. Which, I'll be honest here, didn't really make the characters look that appealing to look at. Sure, the show was still pretty okay up until its cancellation in 2004, but it still didn't provide the same amount of beauty and creativity that only the hand-drawn original animation had had. Now, there was one thing that I forgot to mention about the show, and by far one of the main reasons why the show was such a huge bright spot throughout my life. That was the darker episodes in TV movies. This alone honestly opened me up to rather upsetting and dark topics that not only were very well done animation-wise, but also beautifully executed in terms of plot, storyline, and voice acting as well. One of these amazing movies was Franklin and the Search for Turtle Lake. By far, hands down, one of the best animated cartoon films on television to date, in my opinion. I love the beauty that was put in the storyline, the dark concept, and even the animation, which for anyone wondering was animated by former Disney animators. How awesome is that? For anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, I'm not going to spoil anything about it. Go watch it for yourself on YouTube. Trust me, you'll thank me later for it. Honestly, the show was such an inspiration to me throughout my youth and teenage years that I decided to dedicate my life to animation. It wasn't going to be an easy task for me to get into the school that I wanted to get, but I managed to persevere with the ACTs, SATs, and many other tests as well to gain the credits that I needed for a full-on scholarship, which I got, by the way. Not only did I continue to persevere with my studies at school, but I also dedicated as much free time as I could give to perfecting my drawing skills and working with animation and the like. Let me tell you all one thing right now, it was certainly not an easy task. But I'd be lying when I say that it wasn't worth it. By the time I had started my first year in college, I was already animating various shorts and the like on multiple sites, as well as YouTube, earning money in the process so that I wouldn't have to work at fast food or retail to pay for my various things that I needed. Things were honestly going well for me at the time, and, with no shame, I can certainly say that I was watching a lot of Franklin the Turtle religiously during my time there. And why wouldn't I? Watching the show and admiring the animation was honestly the one thing that I could at least do, as an act of gratitude for everything that it's given me. Now, I can certainly say that I'm pretty knowledgeable about the whole show. Not to brag, anyway. But still. During this one conversation that I was having with a friend of mine, by the name of Barry, on Skype, he had told me about a supposed rumor that he had heard about the show, and wanted to share it with me. Curious to know, I asked him what it was about, thinking that I already knew what it likely was going to be about. All instincts in my mind shattered into pieces as he told me during our conversation. Supposedly from a friend of mine's, apparently there was going to be another episode created for the show back before its move to CGI animation. I asked him what it was, and what it was about. The only thing that he was really able to tell me, due to the lack of information that he was given on the subject, was that there was an episode that was going to focus on Bear and Franklin's relationship, and may possibly hint to something more at the end of the episode. Unfortunately, it was rejected by the higher-ups due to the controversy surrounding the episode, and thus it was scrapped from the lineage and replaced with another episode in the later season. I asked him about what the name of the episode was and if he had any kind of links to back up his claims. He told me that he didn't have any, and that, as it was only a rumor, at least in his mind. I thanked him for what he had given me, and we soon hung up afterwards. I'm not gonna lie when I say that I found it to be particularly interesting. I mean, when you really think about it, Bear really does have a huge fascination to Franklin in many episodes. In fact, it even seems that Franklin is the only person that he wants to even hang around with at all. Hell, he wouldn't even play with any of the other kids unless Franklin was there with him. Not to mention that it was completely easy for him to forgive Franklin for any mistakes that he had done, especially after that one episode where Franklin tells Bear's secret. There are plenty of other scenes as well in the show that strongly hint that Bear has a deep liking or even a deep love for Franklin as well. However, I do remember being rather mystified about the new strand of information that I had been given by my friend Barry. I think I actually paced around my room for at least a few hours in my dorm trying to think more about this supposed episode. Of course, logic did wind up rearing its ugly head sooner than later, and for a time I simply dismissed it as being nothing more but a rumor. An interesting one, but still a rumor nonetheless. So I pretty much went on my way for a good month or so. But where the topic wound up coming back again in animation class that I was taking at the time. What happened was relatively interesting, but from what I could recall, my professor was discussing an important topic on layering and decided to use an example of the Franklin show to further prove his point. It was at this point that one of the students immediately raised his hand and then asked the professor about the supposed rumored episode about Franklin Bear. Now, I was pretty much facepalming at the time due to the fact that this was a relatively stupid question, especially on something that he likely had nothing to do with it, or at least anything to do with the rumor. Now imagine my shock and surprise when the professor put his yardstick down, that's what he used for pointing things out, and then began asking the students about the specifics of the episode. Well, like with my friend on Skype, the young man who brought the thing up to begin with began discussing as much as he could about the episode in question, even going into a bit more detail about it in the process. My professor simply scratched his chin for a while in contemplation before coming up with the answer of yes, as he had heard about it as well. He even went so far to say that he had worked on the project for a little while before it had been banned entirely. Well, more in secret. The other students started to vocally show deep disdain for the idiots that had banned that episode, but my professor quickly stopped the whole classroom into turning into a political debate from hell by simply telling everybody that class was dismissed for the day. After giving our assignments to be done and turn in the next week, still lives, I hate them with a passion, everyone soon wound up leaving the place. I, however, stayed around for a bit, and decided to do a little bit of prying on my teacher to get a little bit more information about the episode in question. Once the last student had left, I quickly made my way over towards my professor and began asking him about the episode in question. "Well," he began, "kinda surprised me that you want to hear more of it, but honestly, it's nothing really that interesting," he told me. "Still, Mr. Hines, I'd really like to know more about this episode, and why it was banned to begin with." My professor simply looked at me for a little bit, and then said, "Okay," before going to his desk and rummaging around it for a bit. It took him a few minutes, but soon he pulled out a large folder and opened it up. It's then that he began searching for something in there, until he wound up pulling out a large slip of paper, going over to the copier and then making a copy, and then coming back to me and handing me the copy of the page. I took a look at it, and it was filled with about 10 or so handwritten phone numbers. That should get you started. One of my old colleagues at the studio likely has a copy of the episode. Now, I do ask you to not pry too much. If you do, they likely won't give you the episode because they'll think you're trying to post it online or something. So just give them a shot, and if you get anything, let me know about it afterwards. Might consider using the subject of it as a project." My professor told me with a wink, before saying goodbye and making his way out of the classroom. Well, at least I had gotten something in regard to the episode. Sort of. Taking a look at the numbers, I didn't hesitate to immediately start calling them up. A few numbers were pretty much dead, others were moved to a different line, but the last one actually worked. Now, the person who I had talked to had demanded me not to mention their name, or really anything about them. Hell, I couldn't even say what gender the person was. Basically, this anonymous person gave me some details about the episode, and that this person actually had it and would send it to me via email because the person was very concerned about them getting fired from their job if it was leaked. I agreed with them, and soon wound up getting an email in my junk files with a video attachment to it. I had already received permission by the sender to download the video, so it only took around one click to get this episode from my email to my computer in about 5 or 10 minutes. Once it had finished downloading, I deleted the email and went back to checking my downloads folder for the episode that I had, downloaded. It took a little bit of looking, but I soon found it under the name Franklin Ep Bear.mp4. The total watch time was around 20 minutes in total, so with nothing else to lose, I clicked on the video file and launched it in Windows Media Player. The episode began with the main intro for Franklin, the "Hey, it's Franklin," playing its usual tone and guitar beat until the intro ended with Franklin standing at his table with the building block spelling out his name in the process. The scene then faded in on itself and then transitioned over to show the main home of the protagonist, Franklin. The beginning scene was in its usual happy-go-lucky kind of manner, with Franklin making his way out of the house with Snail perched on his shoulder. "You have fun now, you two," Franklin's mother called out to the two. "We sure will, Mom. We'll be back home for lunch soon," Franklin said back. "Okay, sweetie. Oh, and don't forget to invite Bear over as well. I'm making him that stew that he loves," Franklin's mother called out again. "Oh, don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure of it," Franklin said as he and Snail began to laugh a little bit, before making their way towards the forest with big smiles on their faces. "So, Franklin, what new game are we going to play today?" Snail inquired. "Well, I'm not really sure today, but I'm sure that Bear and the others will come up with something to do. You know how hyper he can be sometimes," Snail said. Yeah, you're right. Besides, he's likely going to want to work up an appetite anyway for the stew that Mom made for lunch today anyway. "Are you going to join us for lunch today, Snail?" Franklin asked. Snail simply nodded his head in a no position and said, "Afraid not, Franklin. My parents and I are going out to eat today," Snail answered. Franklin seemed rather intrigued at what Snail had said, and giving the mentioning of going out to eat. "Huh. Well, where are you and your parents going to, Snail?" Franklin asked. "Beats me," Snail replied. "All I know is that it's somewhere new and special." Once their conversation had ended, the scene then panned over towards the woods, before immediately cutting to show Bear, Beaver, and Fox all standing at various parts of the clearing in the woods, all looking rather bored. "I can't think of anything to do today. Can you guys?" Bear asked as he looked over towards Beaver and Fox for any kind of suggestion. The two only looked at him for a bit before shaking their head no, as if they had no idea what in the world to do. Bear seemed a little agitated at this, and just slumped down next to the tree that he was sitting next to. He let out a small sigh before his eyes widened a bit with excitement as the scene cut to show Franklin making his way into the clearing where the others were at. "Hey, Franklin," Bear said, jumping up almost immediately and making his way towards his best friend. "Hey, Bear," Franklin answered back before getting a huge bear hug from Bear himself. Franklin was caught a little bit off guard at this, but he simply smiled and hugged back. Soon a soft ahem caused the two to break from their hug. The scene then panned over to show Beaver and Fox standing about a foot away from the two. "If you two lovebirds are done squishing each other, I'd like to say hello to Franklin too," Beaver said. "Oh, yeah, go right on ahead. Sorry about that," Bear said, blushing, before taking a step back and letting the others either get a hug or a high five in. "So, guys," Franklin said as he placed a small backpack on the ground before placing Snail down right next to him, "what's on today's agenda?" Well, if sitting here bored as ever counts as an agenda, then I'd say we're doing it right now, Beaver said in a sarcastic manner. Franklin's face fell a little bit after hearing that, but soon he started to rummage around his backpack for something before pulling out a large glass bottle. The others simply stared at it for a bit, confused as to what Franklin was doing with the large bottle in his backpack. Well, I was thinking, why not just play a little spin the bottle to pass the time? Franklin asked. Well, I'm not against it in any way, Fox said. That actually sounds kind of fun, Bear answered. Ooh, I got something. I got something we can do while we play it, Bear said excitedly. How about we play a little truth or dare, and whoever spins the bottle gets to ask the question to the person it points at? Beaver asked. There was no objection to any of the others on the game, so they all sat down in a small circle and began playing. Now, for anybody wondering, the Truth or Dare segment really wasn't anything too particularly crazy, but a few were somewhat interesting. However, it was only when the bottle reached Bear that things got heated. Just as the bottle had pointed right at Bear, Beaver gave a bit of a sly smile, as if she had been waiting for this moment. So, Bear, Beaver began, truth or dare? Bear thought about the question for a bit before finally deciding to go the safe route and say, truth. Beaver then gave another smile and then asked her question. Okay, Bear, since you said truth, here's what I got for you, Beaver began. How much do you like Franklin? Bear blinked his eyes a bit at that statement before finally answering. Well, Franklin is my best friend, so I'd say I like him a lot, Bear answered. You sure about that, Bear? Beaver said. Bear, now looking slightly offended at this point, said, Of course I am. Why wouldn't I think that? He's my best friend, and nothing will ever change that, Bear said with a bit of force in his voice. Both Franklin and Fox both looked over at Beaver with a bit of confusion. Franklin even tilted his head at the question itself. However, it didn't end with just that. So you only see Franklin as just a friend? Beaver asked. Bear immediately froze and began blushing like crazy. Then, in a sudden fit of rage, he took the bottle and threw it across the forest floor, causing it to break in half on a tree. It's then that Beaver's face took on a new expression, one of shock and surprise. All the others stared up at Bear, mouths slightly agape. He's my best friend and nothing Bear stopped and then huffed and then began making his way towards the path that led out of the forest without saying another word. It took a few seconds before Franklin immediately getting back up and saying to the other two, I'm gonna go check up on Bear. The young turtle then made his way towards the path where Bear had taken. The scene then cuts to show Bear standing at a tree with one of his paws on the bark of it. Franklin then walked up to him slowly, trying not to startle him. Bear? Franklin asked before stopping a distance away from him. Bear immediately turned around, and his face, once angry, now held a softer expression. Oh, hey, Franklin, Bear answered. Are you okay? You seemed kind of upset about Beaver's question back there, Franklin questioned. Bear simply bit his lip a little before taking in a deep breath and saying, I'm fine, Franklin. I don't know why I overreacted so much back there anyway, Bear admitted. If Beaver said anything to upset you, you know that she doesn't mean to say that. I mean, think about all the times she teased me and Sam back at the... Franklin's sentence was cut off when Bear's paw, the one that was still on the tree trunk, immediately balled itself into a fist and crushed up a heavy amount of bark, while Bear's face grew contorted like he had been hit in the stomach. I know, Bear growled a little, before opening his eyes and seeing Franklin's slightly frightened face. Bear immediately let out a small cough before cleaning his paws off from the bark, and his tone and facial expression immediately returned back to its softer tone. I know, Franklin, and it was silly of me to react that way, Bear said, rather embarrassed. Oh, and sorry about the bottle, Bear said before making his way back down the path. Wait, Bear, don't you want to come to my house for lunch today? My mom made the stew you like, Franklin said. I'm not hungry, Franklin, Bear answered back before finally going out of the scene. But you're always hungry, Franklin muttered to himself before turning back to where the others were at. The scene then switched back to show Franklin making his way back into the small patch in the forest where Beaver, Fox, and Snail were waiting for him. Hey, Franklin, Beaver said. I, I, I didn't mean to make Bear angry like that. I just thought it was a funny little joke. And it's okay, Beaver, Franklin said. I already talked with Bear. He seems to be okay now, Franklin said, hesitating at some parts. Well, it's almost lunchtime anyway. I think it's best that we start heading back home until we're done eating, Snail said. Oh, yeah, I have to get you home. You got that little lunch thing at the restaurant. See you guys later. I need to go and drop off Snail. I'll see you guys at the playground later on, right? Franklin asked. Count on it, Beaver said before giving Franklin a thumbs up. Franklin then picked up Snail and then began making his way down the path. The scene then faded into black before fading back into Franklin and Snail in the middle of a conversation. So let me guess, it didn't go too well like you said it did it? Snail said. Well, it did for the most part, but he still acted a little bit odd after that, Franklin said. Honestly, I don't understand why Bear would get that upset over a question, Snail said. Well, it was a bit of a personal question, Snail, and the way that Beaver mentioned it might have set him off a bit, Franklin said in Bear's defense. I don't know, Franklin, Snail said, as he was lowered down to the ground to his house. Bear always listened to Beaver's little teases before, and he's never had a problem with it. Even if it was directed at him, he still didn't mind. But today, it seems a little odd that he would be upset about it, don't you think? I'll see if I can talk with him after lunch. Maybe he was just grumpy that he didn't eat anything yet, Franklin said. Snail only gave Franklin a rather are-you-serious kind of look. You and I both know, Franklin, that Bear never skips a meal. Ever, Snail said. And the fact that he didn't want to even come over to your house for lunch, especially after it being that stew that he loves so much. Honestly, I have a lot of questions, but that's something I think only you two should talk about, Snail said. Yeah, you're right, Snail. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow, Franklin said before leaving the scene. Upon making his way back home, Franklin stepped into the kitchen of his home and sat down at the table where a small bowl of stew was waiting for him on the table. Franklin, isn't Bear coming over? Franklin's mother asked as she continued stirring the large pot of stew that was simmering in the pot. No, he said he wasn't really hungry today, Franklin said. Huh, that really isn't like him. Well, if he does want to go and get some, he can. Just make sure to bring him here tomorrow, and I'll make sure to heat up the leftover stew and everything for him tomorrow, Franklin's mother said with a soft smile. Franklin simply thanks her, and then proceeds to finish off the rest of his lunch, before making his way back outside to the same clearing that he had gone before. When he finally arrives, both Badger and Fox are sitting in their spots next to a couple of trees. Hey guys, where's Bear? Franklin asked. No idea. Probably still at his house or something, Beaver replied. Oh. Also, why aren't any of you guys at the playground? I checked over there, but I didn't see any of you there, he said. Oh, we decided not to go. It rained yesterday, so the place would have been too wet. Oh, Franklin said. He then proceeded to grab his backpack and start digging through it, pulling out another glass bottle. Well, anyone want to finish up that game of Truth or Dare that we were playing earlier? After what happened with Bear, I think I'm gonna pass on that one, Franklin, Beaver said. Me too, Fox answered. Franklin simply nodded and said, okay, before putting the bottle back in his backpack. So what do you guys want to do now? I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can do in the woods. I mean, we can go fishing in the lake, or we can come over to my house and play some more, Franklin said. Actually, Franklin, I need to go do something real quick. It won't take too long, though. So how about I meet you guys at your house and we can continue playing when I'm done? Beaver said. Oh, well, okay then, Franklin said. I'll see you at my house then? You bet it, Beaver simply said, before immediately making her way off screen. The scene then transitioned to show Beaver at Bear's front door, knocking on it and then waiting for a little bit. After a few seconds, Bear's mother, Dr. Bear, opened up the front door. Oh, hello there, Beaver, Dr. Bear greeted. Hi, Dr. Bear. I was wondering if your son was home, Beaver asked. Actually, yes, he's upstairs in his room. Would you like me to go and get him for you? Mrs. Bear asked. Actually, if it's okay, I'd like to check up on him myself, Beaver said. Oh, and why so? Dr. Bear asked. Well, me and Bear had a little bit of a falling out, and I wanted to go and apologize to him for it. Oh, well, he should be up in his room. Go on ahead and take as much time as you need, Miss Dr. Bear said. Beaver then immediately made her way into the house, and then proceeded to make her way up towards the stairs into Bear's room. Once there, she immediately knocked on the door and then said, Hey, Bear, it's me, Beaver. I just wanted to talk, if that's okay with you, Beaver said. There was no response for a little bit before the door to Bear's room slowly opened up and a brown paw gestured her to come inside, which she did without question. Upon making her way inside of Bear's room, Bear immediately closed the door's room shut and then made his way over towards Beaver with a stoic look. Hey, Beaver, Bear said rather forlornly. Hey, Bear, look, about what happened earlier, I didn't mean for it to upset you like that, and Beaver was cut short when Bear smiled and raised his hand to her. It's okay, Beaver, you didn't mean to do any of that. I forgive you, Bear said. Well, that's good, Beaver said with a sigh of relief. However, there is something I do want to talk to you about, Bear said rather flatly. Beaver froze for a bit, and then proceeded to immediately go over to where Bear was sitting at on his bed. Noticing that Bear had a rather ashamed look on his face as she drew closer to him. Well, what's up? Beaver asked. Bear let out a sigh and then turned his head to Beaver with the same upset look on him. I need to tell you something. Something really personal, Bear said as he shifted his eyes away from after saying the word personal. This caught Beaver's attention, and she drew closer to hear what it had to say. But before I tell you, you need to promise me one thing, and one thing only, Bear said firmly. Sure, anything, Bear. You can trust me, Beaver said. Bear then leaned into Beaver's ear and then began whispering inaudibly into it. As he did, Beaver's eyes lightened up like a light, and a huge grin formed across her face. Once Bear retreated from her ear, she turned to Bear with the biggest grin on her face. Wow, Bear, Beaver began. I always knew you had a thing for Frank. Beaver's sentence was then cut off again, when the scene cut to show Bear cringing a little bit, and then proceeding to make gestures for her to stop talking. Listen to me, Beaver. You can't tell anyone about this, not even Franklin, Bear whispered. Why not? Beaver began. I'm sure that he wouldn't have an issue with that. Just promise me you won't say anything to him, please, Bear begged. Look, Bear, it's not like you can keep that a secret forever. Just think about that flag that you made at the clubhouse. You know, regardless of whether or not you were hiding it or not, it was going to be shown anyway, Beaver answered. Bear was now starting to get a little bit agitated at Beaver's persistentness at this point, and he made no hesitation to try and make a mention of how he felt. Beaver, read my lips. You can't tell Franklin anything about what I said to you. This isn't like the little, Bear struggled to get to say what he was saying. This isn't like that flag, Beaver. This is something a lot more serious. Just please Please don't tell Franklin any of this. I just. I don't want him to hate me, Bear said as his gaze finally turned to his feet. Bear, I get it. I get it a lot, Beaver said. I won't say a thing, I promise, Beaver said. You sure about that? Bear said. Cross my heart, Beaver said. The scene then faded in itself before quickly transitioning to show Franklin's home at night, before panning in to show Franklin sitting in the living room with his father on the couch. The two were sipping a mug of hot chocolate before suddenly a knock came from the front door. I'll get it, Franklin said as he made his way towards the doorway. As he opened the door, he was soon greeted by both of his friends, Fox and Beaver, much to his surprise. Fox? Beaver, what are you guys doing here? Shouldn't you guys be in bed by now? Franklin asked. Both Fox and Beaver looked over at each other, and then back at Franklin with worried expressions on their faces. It's then that Mr. and Mrs. Turtle came into the scene and asked the same series of questions that Franklin had asked the two of them. Fox was the one that answered for the both of them. There's a problem. Bear didn't come home after our playdate today. All of the parents and everyone else is looking everywhere for him. We need your guys' help to find him. Oh dear, this is serious, Franklin's mother responded. Okay, do you kids have an extra flashlight on you? Franklin's father asked. Yes, sir, Fox said as he held up a second flashlight. Okay, good. Franklin, I need you to go with your friends and start looking for Bear. Your mother and I will follow up soon. If you find anything, come and find us, Franklin's father said. Franklin agreed, and then the three kids soon left the house, and they began searching around to try and find where Bear could have been at. However, they didn't really get a whole lot of progress done. That is, however, just as they were walking there, Franklin walked up to Beaver to ask her about where she had been at. That is until he wound up catching something that she said. It wasn't exactly said entirely what it was, but from what I can remember, there was a little muttering about something about Bear and Franklin, which immediately caught his attention. What was that, Beaver? What about me and Bear? Franklin asked as he stopped by the path by the forest that the two were standing at. Beaver immediately froze when she had heard what Franklin had said, and immediately did what she could to try and dodge the question. I didn't say anything, Franklin. Have you seen Bear anywhere? Franklin, knowing that what Beaver said wasn't exactly true, continued to be persistent about what she had actually said. This went on for a few more minutes until she soon finally relented and then began to spill the beans. Okay, Franklin. You remember when I left to go and talk with Bear a few days back to apologize? Beaver said. Yeah, what about it? Franklin asked. Well, he told me something while I was there, and it involved you, Beaver said. Well, what is it that he said? Franklin asked again. Beaver, with as much hesitance as she possibly could muster, motioned for Franklin to come next to her, which he did, and then she began whispering into Franklin's ear. Franklin looked a little bit shocked at what he had heard, but judging by it, it was likely that Beaver hadn't exactly told him everything. Franklin immediately turned to Beaver and said, Huh. Do you know anything else more about this, Beaver? However, Beaver refused to say anything else. Instead, she simply wound up pointing towards something, which immediately caught Franklin's attention, and he immediately turned around and looked at, to which Beaver immediately ran off. Franklin immediately turned around and just stood there, completely alone, in a bit of confusion as to why Beaver just completely ditched him there. However, he quickly dismissed it and then began looking down the path by himself. As he did so, he started asking himself a couple of questions. If I were Bear, where would I hide at? Franklin said. Then, in an instant, a little light bulb flashed up where Franklin was at, and he immediately snapped his fingers and then began mentioning the treehouse. It didn't take him too long to finally get to where he needed to get at and start climbing up the ladder to the treehouse. The scene then wound up cutting to the darkened part of the treehouse, with Franklin pulling up the latch inside of it that led inside of it and began climbing in. Bear, are you in here? Franklin called out. Franklin, is that you? Bear said. Franklin immediately shined his flashlight down to where the voice had came from. There, he was met with Bear, curled up in a corner in the treehouse with a saddened look on his face. Franklin immediately went up towards him and sat down next to him. Bear, where have you been? Franklin began. Everyone's worried sick about you, Franklin said, a little bit upset. I figured that much, Bear answered before lowering his head again. Don't suppose you have any food on you, do you? Franklin immediately reached over to a small little picnic basket that was next to it and pulled out a bag of cookies. However, just before he was about to hand them over to Bear, Franklin immediately turned to him and said, If I hand you these cookies, Bear, you need to tell me what's going on, he said. Bear nodded, and then proceeded to immediately, and before Franklin handed him the cookies, Bear gobbled them down rather greedily, and then, once he was completed with them, his face began lowering. Franklin immediately saw the look on Bear's face, and his upset face now softened into one that looked concerned more. Bear, okay, why didn't you go home today? Franklin asked. Bear didn't really say too much, but said, I don't know if I can go home, Franklin. Is there something bothering you? Franklin asked him. If there is, you know you can talk to me, right? Franklin said. Bear immediately lifted his head, meeting the gaze of Franklin in the process. I just like it up here, that's all, Bear answered. I know that isn't true, Bear, and I want to know what's up with you. You promised you said you would tell me. Why didn't you come home? Why have you been avoiding me and the others the past few days? Franklin asked. You wouldn't understand, Franklin, Bear said. Try me, Franklin said. Bear immediately started to shake, and soon buried his face into his knees and started to sob. Franklin saw this and immediately did what he could to try and comfort him. After a few seconds of this, the scene then cut to show Bear lifting his head up and meeting Franklin's gaze. Tears were streaming down his eyes, and he struggled to try and talk. I'm sorry, Franklin. I'm so sorry, Bear said in between hiccups. Franklin then reached over to a small table and then proceeded to hand Bear a box of tissues, which he gratefully accepted. Bear, whatever it is that it's eating you up, you need to tell me what it is that we can fix it, Franklin said. I don't think this can be fixed, Franklin, Bear answered back. Come on, Bear. Tell me what it is. I'm your best friend. You know that I'm always here for you. I promise you, whatever it is that you have to say, just let me know what it is, Franklin said. You'll hate me, Bear answered back. I would never hate you, Bear. You're my best friend in the whole world. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could ever make me hate you, Franklin said. Bear then let out another blow on the tissue before putting the box of tissues down and taking in a deep breath of air. Okay, come here, Bear said, motioning for Franklin to come down closer to him. Franklin did just that, and Bear began to whisper, inaudibly, into Franklin's ear. Franklin's eyes widened a little bit about what he had heard, and it didn't take long for Bear to finally, remove himself from Franklin's ear. Huh. Well, I mean, Bear, you know there's nothing wrong about that. I mean, like my parents always told me that it doesn't matter what you like. Everyone has different likes and different needs and different taste. It's completely and utterly normal for you to have those kind of likes. There's nothing wrong about that, Franklin said. Bear simply looked down at his feet, not really answering. But that's not the whole thing, is it? Franklin said. Bear simply nodded, and then motioned for Franklin to come back to his mouth again. Franklin did such, and Bear immediately began to whisper inaudibly again. This time, Franklin's eyes widened a little bit wider than it had been before, and his mouth went down agape. Soon, Bear wound up pulling his face away and just sat there in great shame. Franklin had a little bit of a look of surprise, while a small blush grew on his face. Wow, Franklin said, still kind of shocked. Yeah, I know, Bear answered. How long did you feel this way? Franklin asked. Since we became best friends, Bear answered. I see. Well, Bear, uh, you, uh, I, I, Franklin didn't know what to say. There's nothing wrong about it, though, Franklin said. Maybe to you, but I just, I feel so bad. I really do. I just, I kept this whole secret. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid it would end our friendship, Bear said. I'm sorry, Franklin. I should have just kept that to myself, Bear said. Bear, it's not healthy to keep things inside of you. And like I said, I'm here for you. Franklin, can I ask you something? Bear asked. Sure, buddy. What is it? Franklin asked. Do you feel the same way? Bear asked. Franklin bit his lip a little, not really knowing what to say or really what to do. I honestly don't know, Bear. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're my best friend and I love you, but... Franklin stopped. You don't like me in that kind of way. I get it, Bear answered. I was kind of expecting that. But... it was still kind of worth a try. I'm sorry, Bear. I'm sorry if that upsets you. I mean, you're really nice and everything, but... Franklin admitted as he stared down at his toes in sadness. Bear lifted his head up again. This time he had a bit of a smile on his face. It's okay, Franklin. If it's not meant to be, then that's okay, Bear said, his voice now light-hearted. Franklin smiled at him. Just because I may not feel the same way you do, doesn't mean that you're any less of my best friend, Bear. And no matter what, I'll always be your friend. And that'll never, ever change, Franklin said. Thanks, Franklin. You really helped me out with this one. I'm just worried about what my parents are gonna think when I tell them about, well, me. And what else I'm gonna wind up getting when I get home. Bear said, now worriedly. You don't need to worry about that, Bear. I'll help you with it. And I promise to stay by your side while you do it too, Franklin said with a soft smile on his face. Bear simply thanked Franklin, and the two of them made their way out of the treehouse and then out of the forest. The scene then switched to show Bear and Franklin making their way down their path, with everyone else seeing the two and rushing towards them to make sure that they were both okay. Bear's mother ran as quickly as she could and went towards her son and embraced him. The rest of the scene then showed the whole situation, with everyone cheering after Bear being found. The aftermath then showed when it cut back to a last scene, with Bear making his way over towards Franklin's door with both Beaver and Fox. Franklin then opened up the door with a baseball bat in his hands. Hey, Franklin, you ready for our baseball practice today? Bear asked. You bet I am, Bear. I got the bat, too, Franklin said. All four of them immediately started making their way down the road, laughing as they did, before soon immediately making their way out of sight. The episode then faded out to black and then ended. I'm not gonna lie, when I say that this episode pretty much had me in tears. This was one of the best episodes of Franklin that I've ever seen in my life, and yet it was never aired. Although I can certainly admit that the ending was a little bit bittersweet in my taste, nonetheless it was still a really good episode. But at the same time, I could see why it was banned to begin with, despite the fact that I extremely disagree with it ever being the case. Now, as my professor had told me, I'm not going to really show much of the video, unless I somehow manage to get permission to actually upload it online by the creator. Even as I currently speak, I'm trying to contact the creator and see if I can negotiate the rights to the episode, even if I have to pay for it. Because this beautiful piece of artwork deserves every ounce of love that it can get. Not just from me, but to everybody else. And I'm going to make sure of it that that's the case.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.